basically banded together with a few others. And before you know it, the 4 became 14,000. And now we're building together this movement, essentially, that posits an alternative to venture, posits a holistic, generative way of building businesses. And we're, sort of gently transforming the world. It's not a revolution, it's an evolution. And we're basically gently changing and transforming the way that people are building businesses that are better for the world. And maybe I'll stop there so that we have plenty of time for discussion and questions. So back to you, Elena.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Astrid. Very interesting, but there's so much more. There's so much more to Zebras Unite. Let me start by saying or recommend to our audience to specifically, as you said, read Sex and Startups. Well, read all the articles, but start with Sex and Startups, because there's some mind-blowing quotes like, startups are like the male anatomy designed for liquidity events, but a startup has about as much chance of making it as a single sperm has of fertilizing an egg. And on and on. It's very interesting. In this sense, this article was the beginning of everything. And the premise was that the current technology and venture capital structure is broken. You were saying it just a minute ago. Tell us more about how the entrepreneurship community, especially in Silicon Valley, reacted to it.
Because it was so irreverent, right? So we're using humor, and Mara and Jen are both recovering journalists, right? So they certainly have a way with words. And it was provocative, right? People felt provoked. Everybody laughed, right? Because everybody recognized there's truth to it, right? And I think that humor ended up being disarming, and it ended up opening some doors to some serious conversation about, what's broken with this model. And there were lots and lots of people from all over the spectrum who said, yeah, I recognize that. Even VCs who said, yeah, this really messed up the way we're operating, but now what, right? And so that was really the tenor of the conversation was, if it was a little bit hostile, people would say, well, if you're so smart, why don't you propose something better? Which we did. Or people said, oh, I totally recognize this. Now what? Where do I go? And both of those responses became motivators for Zebras Fix What Unicorns Break.
Well, now that you mentioned that, then in Zebras Fix What Unicorns Break, you say the business model is the message. Could you explain a bit further? Could you explain further?
Yeah, so what's interesting is when I look at Zebra companies in our community, or I look at my own company, how you structure your business, how you structure the ownership, how you make money tells the truth of who you are as a person, right? And who you are and what the truth of the business is. Early on, when social media platforms were just coming into existence, I should say I'm trained as an economist. I was skeptical from the get-go because I looked at these business models and I said, well, what's the catch? Like, there's something not right about Facebook, and what's not right is that it's free, right? Because if you're not paying for it, then you're the product, right? And that's exactly what happened, right? So that's the truth of the business model, is that if you're choosing a revenue model that monetizes engagement and attention, then you're extractive, right? Or if, like Uber, you're creating a platform that treats the drivers basically as contract workers, but doesn't let them participate in the value that you're creating, then you're creating an extractive business model. And in both cases, there are Zebra alternatives, right? Or founders that are thinking about solving similar market problems that are very interesting market problems when you think about them, but they go about it differently, right? Maybe they form a co-op structure, maybe they have an explicit model to pay for the service, etc. And so that's the truth of what's happening is basically encoded, not just in the business model, but also in the corporate form itself.
So, well, you went to do what most entrepreneurs do, is they find a problem and they go and find a solution, which is the beginning of everything. I also have to say to our audience, if they haven't gone through Astrid's profile, she says she knows about economics. She has a PhD, she's doctor in economics, so she knows a bit about economics, I would say. In that sense, as Astrid, you've mentioned, and we've read about it, both from Zebras Unite and in general, that 90% of startups fail. The majority, they say, die within 20 months of the last round of funding. Success equals the amount of money raised or the profits made upon exit. Forgetting about the, the capital. What I mean is, should we consider this a fail? And how would you redefine success in Zebras Unite?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, right? Like if you look at a company like Tesla, they are finally profitable, after having raised hundreds of millions and billions. And then you've got failed startups like, what was that streaming service, Quibi, right? That raised $1 billion and still failed. So funding success is not a predictor of economic long-term success of a company, right? And so what we are interested in is, and what many founders I think are interested in, is building a company that lasts, that is sustainable, not just in the sort of ecological sense, but that's financially sustainable, that makes their founders a comfortable living, that pays their staff, right? Like these are all signals of success in my book. And of course, as you can tell from my accent, I'm originally German. In Europe, right, where we have this idea of a family firm that is in a family for hundreds of years, right? And here in the US, it's like, well, if it fails in 2 years, I'll just create another company. It's a different mindset in Silicon Valley, which is part of the problem. The Silicon Valley mindset doesn't actually travel very well to other cultures, where we have a sense of the longevity of a company is success, and so there are some really interesting sort of cultural tensions in this idea of a unicorn that don't travel very well.
So why did you choose the zebra as a symbol then, Astrid?
Yeah, well, zebras are, unlike unicorns, are real creatures. So that was the first start. It's not a mythical creature. It actually exists in the world. It's black and white. It combines profit and purpose, right? The black of the profit and the white of the purpose. It is feisty. Zebras are really feisty animals. They're unafraid. They take on lions if need be. They're collaborative, right? They're herd animals. So they to us, they represent that mutualism. And they also are just cute. I mean, look at your t-shirt. How cute are zebras, right? So we have a lot of fun with the...
Talking about cute.
Oh my goodness, you brought all that. See, I've got one on my shelf behind me.
It is the cutest thing, I know. Huh?
But we have a lot of fun with the branding and the swag and the...
I can imagine. I've seen you with a pin with a zebra. You have to have it all. The socks probably are black and white. But tell us, Astrid, about okay, this is fair enough, but what about the growth? You say growth is not anymore just numbers. And what are the challenges zebra companies face?
One thing that when you think about zebra companies, one thing I like very much is that they are very focused on their customer or their users, right? Because when you are not growing because you're trying to attract the next round of investors, you really have to understand your customers. You have to listen to them. You have to be responsive, right? So it's like taking your mom and pop, like your ice cream shop, but taking that into the 21st century and saying, well, what if we build technology firms and very ambitious, again, these are not brick and mortar lifestyle businesses, these are very ambitious companies, but they're that focused on customer service and customer success, right? And so that it just shifts, again, it shifts your perspective of where you're putting the emphasis in how you're building your business, right? If you're focused on customer success, you may have fewer of them, but they're much happier and they're likely to come back. Whereas in Silicon Valley, the model is churn. Like churn is something you do to butter, right? Like it's a brutal process. You're churning over your customers. You don't care if they burn out and don't like your product, as long as there's 100 more coming in that you're selling to. So I think it's this mindset of what matters for growth. And if you're paying attention to your customers, you're actually getting to profitability more quickly, we believe, right? And you actually, then that becomes your growth strategy, is that you're growing by growing revenue.
It seems pretty obvious when you explaining like that.
We think so.
You also mentioned in the article, in Zebras Fix What Unicorns Break, you say zebras are stuck between two outdated paradigms, non-profit and for-profit. Could you explain this and why it's not true?
Yeah, so it's interesting. And again, remember my own trajectory, and that's why I led with the story of my own company, right? We were incubated in a nonprofit setting. Like the organization I led is a nonprofit, and that's where we were incubated. But the funny thing is, nonprofits have some of the same pathologies, I would say, that venture-funded companies do. And if you think anybody who's ever worked in the nonprofit world knows that you actually care much less about the people you're trying to benefit than you care about your funders, right? So you're always looking to your investors, your funders, the way that venture-funded companies always look to their investors. And that's a problem when you're trying to scale socially impactful solutions, right? So it's again, and there's something that's inherently a scale constraint in nonprofits because you're so reliant on philanthropic support, right? And the for-profit, the way it's conceived, in the dominant paradigm, I should say, is toxic to the social impact, right? So you have this weird tension between creating social impact, but you're having to stay small. You're dependent on contributions that are compatible with the charitable purpose. And on the for-profit side, it's sort of the unicorn or bust mentality, and that's sort of the tension that we're holding as zebra companies, and in part why we find that so many entrepreneurs are actively looking for new corporate forms altogether.
So eventually, do you think this is a trend, Astrid, that all companies in an ideal future and not so far away will end up being zebra companies and the unicorn will disappear?
Well, I mean, we're not trying to exercise unicorns, I mean, I think we just need, sometimes I compare it to flavors in an ice cream store, right? Like if venture capital is vanilla and bank financing is chocolate, and maybe nonprofits are strawberry, it's a boring ice cream store, right? Like I don't know about you, but I like other flavors of ice cream. And so what we're proposing is that we just need more diversity of capital, more diversity of corporate forms that allow entrepreneurs to bring their vision into reality, right? And what happens now is that, like my company, right? Like I got all these questions from like, how are you going to generate hockey stick growth? And I said, I'm not interested in hockey stick growth because I don't want to lie to you about how it's going to come about in the first place. But it's also not the right growth model for the kind of company I'm building. And so then I wasn't right for venture capital. But if there are other forms of capital out there, then you can align the purpose with the financing. And that's really unicorns are fine. I mean, if you want to be a unicorn chaser, knock yourself out. And that's an okay path for some people.
Yeah, but you see more and more there's a trend that things have changed. As you were saying, the entrepreneurs now, they want to have a purpose more than just, I mean, things have changed.
Yeah, for sure.
When I was researching for this chat with you, my colleague mentioned that film that you and I might remember because you are a Gen Xer, more or less like me. And 1987, do you remember Michael Douglas in Wall Street with yes. That sentence that was famous, the greed is good.
Yes.
And it was at the time, it was like the top, the guys at Wall Street, and how things have changed since then. And a lot of people actually wrote to Michael Douglas and to Oliver Stone, who is the director of the film Wall Street. The millennials watching us probably are thinking, what are we talking about? It's a classic. But people were writing to them saying, I want to be like you. This is what I do. I want to be but it's not like that anymore. I mean, a lot of time has passed, but since things are changing, there's a trend then, Astrid, there's light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, there's two things going on here. One is, the Silicon Valley paradigm doesn't work very well in other parts of the world. And we see a lot of attempts to sort of translate, what Y Combinator is doing or 500 startups and sort of plonk down and, do the same in Africa, do the same in Asia. And it just doesn't work. Do the same in Europe. And so we're getting a lot of incoming from folks, including in government, including in the European Commission, saying, how do we encourage startups and business growth, but how do we avoid the pitfalls of Silicon Valley? So we're very encouraged by that, right? So the idea that there's sort of a much more culturally responsive way to grow startups, and it's not the Silicon Valley way, right? And then, as you say, the other thing that's happening is this demographic change, that there are a lot more people now who look at business and say, well, I don't frankly want to be like Elon Musk, right? Like I want to build a good business that does good in the world, that is financially successful. And how do I do both? And I think there are a couple of interesting indicators for where we see that. One is lawyers. Lawyers in Silicon Valley tell me that they get an increasing number of entrepreneurs coming to them who say, well, how do I build a social enterprise? Like, how do I combine the for-profit with a non-profit sidecar? How do I build that from the get-go into my mission? And this one corporate lawyer I was talking to said to me, I don't even know how to advise them, because we tell every entrepreneur to create a Delaware C Corp, which is sort of the classic corporate form that you use in the United States to build a venture-funded company. And the other thing that's been happening is, I think a lot of our viewers, I think, are probably digital natives, right? Who don't even remember a time before the internet. But what everybody is now experiencing is the sort of toxic effects of platforms that were built in the unicorn way. And when you watch movies like The Social Dilemma, for example, you just see how insidious it has become. And what I was just talking to the folks at the Center for Humane Technology yesterday, and they're putting on an event for, what they're calling like how to become a humane technologist. And like 10,000 people signed up,
wow.
Right? Because people want to build technology in different ways, right? And so in that sense, I think there's a sea change going on, that we say, well, we need culturally appropriate forms of supporting startups and creating capital that is responsive. And also the demographic has changed, and people are much, much more aware that these choices of business models and what we're building really matters. And it matters to things like our democracy.
Yeah. That's incredibly interesting, and I couldn't agree more with you, Astrid. Let's change and stop for a while in the mutualism concept. Yeah. How do you think that this approach can make a difference in the world of business, and how do you recommend to take advantage of it in a community like the Explorer one?
Yeah, the main driver, of the unicorn model is competition, right? And you hear it in the way in business school, there's sort of or in the venture world, like how we talk about creating a moat, and you're basically trying to create a monopoly. As an economist, I would describe everything that's going on there as you're trying to create a monopoly. Again, speaking as an economist, what we overlook is that there are actually collective forms of organizing business interests that are much more powerful in the long term. Oligopolies, to use a technical term, like OPEC, right, are actually much, much more powerful in the long term. So sometimes people look at us and say, oh, you must be a bunch of do-gooders, and you want to drive us into socialism and communal ownership. It's like, not really. I mean, those have their role and their purpose. But when you think about it, it's like, what actually works, right? Like, again, using OPEC as an oligopoly in driving and dominating a market, it's actually very, very effective. So when your market is social impact, when you're trying to change the world for the better, an oligopoly, a mutualistic structure, is actually a much safer, a much more stable thing, right? And so that's sort of what we're after here, is like we can actually support each other in achieving our purpose with our companies in ways that benefits everyone. Right. And that's really what we mean by mutualism. I'm not saying we're going to build an OPEC-like oligopoly. I'm just using these technical terms to drive home the point that these are proven structures that are very stable and that create incredible benefit for its participants. Right. And so when we talk about mutualism, we talk about the mutualism between your users or consumers and the company, but also among companies, including companies in the same sector.
So could you give us then, you've spoke about the OPEC, but could you give us examples of zebra companies that are well known, or which we could follow, or are there role models?
Oh, sure. I mean, sometimes the role models can be surprising, and they may not think of themselves as zebra companies, but I would argue that something like a Salesforce, like what Mark Benioff built, is actually very zebra-like when you read about the early days of Salesforce. And how he had trouble getting venture financing and focused on revenue. And it was sort of a new market category, right? Cloud-based computing, software as a service, right? So that was, so a lot of the sort of category innovators, I think, fall under sort of a zebra rubric potentially. Basecamp.
Patagonia,
I think would fit, yeah. and the way they sort of live that ethos. Again, I don't know if they would self-declare themselves as a zebra, but that's an interesting conversation to have with them. I should reach out. Basecamp, you might be familiar with. I would include. Yeah, so I think these are some good examples. Yeah.
And zebra companies are they at the same time B Corp companies? Now there are a lot of companies becoming B Corp. Is this different? Are they?
Yeah, so and we have very cordial relationships with the B Lab, right? I think there's an important distinction between the B Lab certification and the B Corp as a corporate form. So a lot of zebra companies are using the public benefit corporation, which is a legal structure that allows you here in the US and perhaps in other jurisdictions, enables you to anchor your social mission. And that's very, very different from the B Corp certification, which basically just says, oh, I'm trying to do good in the world, but it's not stable. So a well-known example of a B Corp is Etsy, right? Etsy, the craft trading marketplace. That was B Corp certified, but they were still a Delaware C company. Oh. And they had a hostile takeover, basically. Their minority shareholders, a hedge fund, threw out the existing management and said, oh, that B Corp stuff, that's nice to have, but that's not mission critical, and out it went. So what we're really pursuing with the zebra ethos is in part to make sure that your mission is enshrined in your corporate structure. So think about Zebras Unite itself, right? So we're a cooperative, and a nonprofit holds the golden share, and it's the golden share that would have to vote in the affirmative if we ever wanted to demutualize, right? So if Zebras Unite all of a sudden said, oh, let's sell ourselves to Facebook, the golden share would probably say no. And that's a much stronger protection than of a mission than going through the B Corp certification.
We're almost running out of time. We're going to jump into the questions. Remember, I remind our audience to send your questions through the chat, so they will forward them to me through WhatsApp. Here they are. So don't hesitate if you still have questions for Astrid. In the meantime, let me just go through the last two questions, Astrid. In terms of deals between investors and Zebra, are there any ones that that are worth mentioning? So get inspired by what's going on out there?
Yeah, no, there's a bunch that we're really pleased about. One, maybe I'll pick a cooperative. So Savvy Co-op is a healthcare, health data, and patient cooperative, where basically patients participate in the creation of value, for research. It's a super exciting concept, and they received some funding from Indie VC. And if you look at the Indie VC website, they have a burning unicorn. So they're very aligned. The founders of Indie VC, very much aligned with the zebra ethos. Indie VC uses an investment mechanism that's essentially a revenue share. So what they do is they give money to a company with the expectation of a return multiple. So in however many years you agree on, Indie gets back sometimes like 3 times or 5 times the amount they lent to the company, and the company can start paying down that obligation after some amount of time after the financing. And so that's a very interesting combination of a new corporate form and a new financial mechanism that are sort of really well made for each other. So we're excited about that example. And then there are hopefully others that we can talk about in the not too distant future.
I'm sure we will, with the power of Zebras Unite, for sure. Just the last question before we go into the audience questions. As a founder yourself, an entrepreneur, what tips would you give to the explorers that are listening, that are watching us, and they're just at the beginning of their 12 weeks of this pre-incubation program?
Yeah, I looked a little bit at the program, and I will actually speak from the perspective of my company, Amalaria, and the work we're doing. If you Google us or Google the Resilience Exchange, I would say to all of you, don't assume that you are inventing from scratch, right? So part of the problem in the social change space is that we keep reinventing the wheel, and there's some really egregious examples, like there's a technology that's like a water ATM. It purifies water. and people in the slums of Nairobi or Mumbai can go to a facility and get clean water. That innovation has now been invented 5 times in the last 15 years. So don't do that. I don't want to see another water ATM coming out of this program. And so I would encourage everyone to start out by looking who has already done something like what you're thinking about, and think about your innovation from maybe more of a process improvement or sort of a stage, sort of a phase shift improvement, as opposed to, oh, you're the first person who's thought about selling clean water in slums.
Okay, so don't reinvent the wheel.
Do not reinvent the wheel. Whatever you do, please do not reinvent the wheel.
Okay, I have a lot of questions here. Hang on a second. Okay, hang on. I don't know. I have a lot of questions, so we don't have much time. They ask me. They ask you. You mentioned mission. The mission should be inserted in a way in the corporate structure. But why is it so hard to build zebra companies? Oh, that's what they think. Is it hard? And why is it so hard?
You know, I don't think it's that hard, because it's just unfamiliar. So part of what's happened is that the unicorn narrative is so dominant that a lot of entrepreneurs don't know anything else, right? So it's as simple as that. When you actually look at your options, you can take something like a limited liability company, an LLC. That can be a zebra. It's really powerful as a form in your organic documents to anchor your mission and protect it against investor interest. It's just that the dominant paradigm, the narrative, makes it sound like everybody needs to be a unicorn. So it's not that hard. It requires a little bit of specialized help from lawyers, specialized help from accountants, and so on. But it's not that hard. And that's in part why we're building Zebras Unite, so that you can find those resources. And so you can find each other and make it easier to build a company that doesn't need to be a unicorn.
Okay, so it's just when there's a will, there's a way, right?
Well, I'm German, I would say that.
For sure. They ask you also, how do you get early stage investors to understand the concept of zebras and see value for their investments?
Oh, great question. So that's actually one of the services that we think we can provide to the market at large, right? So my experience as an entrepreneur was in part so painful because I had to start every pitch by explaining why I don't fit the dominant paradigm. So part of why we created, and why I call it a marketing cooperative, is like part of what Zebras Unite is doing is we can help educate the market so that it becomes easier for entrepreneurs to start the conversation by saying, I'm going to be a zebra company. I want to talk to you as an investor about a revenue share as opposed to an equity investment. And so that market education is really difficult to do for every individual entrepreneur. And so that's part of what we want to do as a collective, help do that market education so that the cost of friction, right, the transaction cost goes down for entrepreneurs when you're raising money. Okay, so we're getting there, educating the market. This is starting in the US more than in the rest of the world, or is it doesn't really matter? No, I wouldn't say that at all. No, we have had, I think we have an article in an Italian magazine that's about to come out. We've been written about in German. I know there's Spanish language writing about us, certainly in Mexico. We've been translated into Portuguese. So the concept resonates everywhere, right? And we're working on doing that market education using our chapter structure. So that's why it's so interesting, to build out as a global chapter-based organization. So we can work through our chapter leads and figure out who the key influencers are, what events we need to do to help educate the markets. Cool. Yeah. This, in a way, follows the trend of other movements, if you want. Black Lives Matters, even what Greta Thunberg started in a way. It's a kind of movement that it drags us all along. So there we go. We Zebras Unite. The last question from the audience, because we have to jump into the next section. Remember, you can send your questions in Spanish. I'll translate them. Don't worry, okay? Don't be shy. I will not answer in Spanish.
We'll do our best. Okay, so please don't hesitate. They ask you, well, about your midlife. You made a midlife career change. What did you learn, and what would you like to know? What would you would have liked to know at the time when you made that change?
Oh, another great question. You know, one thing I learned is that there is sort of a youth culture, I would say, in startups. There is sort of this idea, like when you look at many accelerators, for example, that you go there for 3 months. I'm not going to leave my family and my child for 3 months, right? Yeah. So it was actually really interesting to realize that when you make this sort of midlife career that switch, right, and especially if you become an entrepreneur, there was a surprising lack of support for Gen X startup founders, which is interesting because as people, we have so much life experience and we go about building businesses in a very different way. I kind of had to find my own support community. It's another reason to build Zebras Unite, right? I actually run into other Gen X founders. That was really interesting. And the other thing, and I don't know if that was a woman or a man who asked the question, it was really interesting to sort of confront the sort of financial insecurity that comes with leaving a full-time job and becoming an entrepreneur. And again, there were some really interesting sort of cultural and social norms that I was butting up against that I hadn't thought about beforehand, but that ended up being very interesting to experience.
Cool. We ran out of time, Astrid. We have to go into the next section. Just remember, guys, it's zebra, not zebra. Zebra, not zebra. We have to say goodbye to the general audience. We're going to continue this TalkX. Well, we say goodbye to the Twitch and the private chat. We're going to continue in the private chat in Planet, exclusively the explorers, the 30 selected and lucky people that have been actually selected for this program. I remind you that we have a link in YouTube in Planet. I'm going to say it in Spanish, Astrid, because I'm getting confused myself. Estamos en el YouTube, tenéis un link a YouTube en Planet, lo sabéis, Explorers, dentro del tablero Beyond Explorer, solo para los participantes de Explorer, okay? Just for Explorer participants. Well, I know they have plenty of questions for Astrid. So thank you everybody for your questions, general audience, Explorers. I'll see you and Astrid. She's going to take a break, 2 minutes break, una descanso de 2 minutos, 2 minutes. Go into your YouTube link in Planet and el tablero Beyond Explorer. We'll see you guys there in around 2 minutes. We're going to wait for you to connect and we'll continue talking to Astrid. This is fascinating. Zebra Unite. See you there.
See you there.
Bye-bye.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello, hello.
Hello, everybody.
Oh.
Hello. Hello.
Everybody's there with their connected.
Wonderful.
No, you remember, guys, podéis hablar en español if you feel shy about English, si tenéis, os da un poco de vergüenza o no, tal, podéis hacer preguntas en español.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, Astrid.
Hola a todos.
Hello, Astrid. There's so
Astrid.
many to ask, Astrid. There's so many
Everybody's
questions.
there with their connected.
Wonderful.
No, you remember, guys, podéis hablar en español if you feel shy about English, si tenéis, os da un poco de vergüenza.
Hay un poco de delay. There's a bit of
Hello, everybody.
Hi, Astrid.
Hola a todos.
Hay un poco de retardo, creo. Hay delay, no? There's a bit of a delay, I believe. Okay, I delay. I'm just checking with the technicians, with the technical team. When do we know we're ready, guys? We have everybody here. There's around 30 people, los selectos. los exclusivos, the exclusive team that has the chance and the opportunity to talk to Astrid. I'm sure we have plenty of potential zebras amongst you guys. Yes, somebody's laughing there. Cristian Romero is laughing. He's definitely a zebra. So venga, Cristian, anímate. Go ahead. Let's start asking Astrid. I know you have plenty of questions for her. They've done their homework. Venga, Cristian, ¿por qué no empiezas tú?
Okay, you want?
Go ahead.
Okay. First of all, it's a pleasure to meet you, Astrid. Okay, sorry for my English, it's a bit bad. Okay, so my ask is, imagine that you have a product, a physical product, okay? You have your prototype made, but you don't have enough money to send this product to production, okay? So how do you, not really, how could you sell this project to an investor, okay, to a potential investor to invest in you?
Yeah, that's a.
Did you get the? Yes, you okay with that?
Yeah, I got the question. You know, that's a very common problem. You know, that you have if you're creating a physical product, and maybe you have a prototype, but you need an investment to be able to scale the production. It's a very, very common problem, and I unfortunately don't know enough about the situation in Spain, but here in the US, sometimes we find that there are government programs that actually have R&D, so grants for research and development. And it is always surprising to me that not more founders use those sources of support. So for example, if you're building something in the aerospace sector, or you're building something in health, or you're building something in agriculture, they're actually designated government programs that help you basically build out your prototype at larger scale. And so that's always something that I would look into. And then there are also there are investors who specialize in manufactured goods and who are very, very interested. Then you just you just have the challenge of finding them, right? And that can be tricky.
Okay, thank you.
Because Cristian, can you tell us about what product is it?
Yeah, what's your product?
Okay, my product is his name is Spencer. Is a electronic dispenser for pills, okay, where you put your, for example, imagine, okay, it's a case, your mother or your father is a polymedicated patient, okay, so you don't know if your mother or your father, sorry, is take her medication or his medication.
Oh,
no?
yeah.
So with my product, you can know with your mobile phone. You have a mobile app and a physical device. The physical device is like this, okay? So this device is in your parents' house, and imagine that your father have to take a doses at 9 o'clock, okay? So at 9 o'clock, this device emits a notification to your parents and other notification to your mobile app. And in this moment, you know if your father or your mother is taking this.
No, I need that device because I forget to take my medication.
If you need, I can sell it.
But that actually brings to mind another source of financing, and I don't know how prevalent that is in Spain. But again, in the US, there are companies like large, in your case, pharmaceutical companies that have venture labs or venture accelerators, and so they actually look for the next good product idea like yours. And so it can be very helpful to reach out to companies in the medical sector, for example, to see if they have a program where basically an early stage innovator like you might find some seed funding or R&D funding. So to use an example that you all will know.
You mean in UK?
No, this could be anywhere. Like I in the US, I don't know what it's like in Spain, but you could find a company.
They are in Spain, Christian. They are in Spain, and through the Explorer program, they will put you in touch with all these options that, as Astrid is saying, both grants, government programs. But bear in mind, as she said, don't reinvent the wheel. Double check that this product doesn't exist already, because I know for sure, as a fact, there are several ones like yours. So, ojo al dato, Christian.
Yeah.
She said, don't reinvent the wheel, double check that your product has either something very innovative or different, because there are already products like that. And through this Explorer program, you're going to find out, and they're going to put you in touch with a lot of the, what there in Spain, there's a big, there are many sources, both public, private, obviously. But so yes,
Right.
as Astrid was saying, we'll talk about this, and we'll orient you in that sense, Christian, but ojo, ojo, as they say, don't fall in love with your product.
Yeah.
In case you have to change it. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Let's go with any more questions, guys. Chicos, a ver, ¿quién se anima? Vamos, en inglés o en español. A Christian le he sacado de voluntario obligado, forced volunteer. But,
May I follow?
Sí, por supuesto. Daniel.
Oh, hi. Hello, everybody. Hi, Astrid. Nice to meet you. I want to ask you a couple of questions, because I've seen that, well, my business is about speaking and help other people to speak better, and the matter of writing, and how all of this is has a relation between them, right? But the point is, I know that is very important to people, the matter of words, but what advice could you give me to transmit that to others? I had a last one that was about diversity, because in Spain, if some people tell, oh, don't tell people that you are Muslim, and that I am against that, because I want to help to create a better society. So what advice could you give us? Thank you very much.
I'm not sure I understood your first question, but let me answer the second one. I think there is a, I mean, one thing we find with Zebras Unite is that a lot of people who identify as zebras, even though we don't lead with that, right? We don't say, we don't show up as a diversity measure, right? Like that's not why we exist. But it turns out that a lot of people who join Zebras Unite are women, are Muslims, are Baha'i, are people of color, are from all these different lived experiences. And I think in general, what we say is your lived experience informs the kinds of products and services you're creating. Right. I'm looking at the woman who's wearing a hijab, right? So for example, there's some great innovative businesses that are making modest fashion, right? Which is something that you care about because you experience it, right? Like it's your lived experience, and maybe you want more fashionable, you have ideas for more fashionable expressions of your customary garments. This is an industry, like the modest fashion industry, is completely ignored by Silicon Valley, right? Like here in the US, like they don't know what to do. They don't know what to do with Muslim women who create modest fashion lines, for example. But it's a huge market. So when you think about it, it's idiotic, right? That we're overlooking, that these mainstream investors are overlooking these tremendous global markets. Right?
Oh my God.
So I think that's the message here. Like diversity is good for business, and represent huge market opportunities, right? And so as Zebras, what we're interested in is figuring out how we can support entrepreneurs of all different stripes who, because of their lived experience, have some really innovative ideas for products and services.
Oh, thank you. Elena.
Daniel, ¿la contestó tu pregunta? Did she answer your first question, or you want me to translate?
La segunda perfecta, pero ¿podría repetir la primera un poco? O sea, la reformulo.
En español, Daniel, a ver si la entiendo yo y se la traduzco.
De acuerdo. Básicamente, mi empresa se centra en la importancia del habla para hacer mejores oradores y luego también a la hora de escribir mejores correos o mejores presentaciones para los CEOs. Porque veo que hay un fallo de estilo. Entonces, pues...
Sí, pero ¿qué tienes? ¿Un SaaS? ¿Un software as a service? ¿O?
No, estaría dándolo... O sea, es una empresa en la que se asesora, se analiza lo que hacen otras personas y luego se les dice cómo mejorar su lenguaje no verbal o lo que...
Pero el modelo de negocio, ¿cuál es, Daniel? ¿Cuál es el modelo de negocio? Es decir, ¿cómo hacéis dinero? ¿Qué vendes? ¿Es el software? ¿Vendes
cursos? Depende.
Cursos, formación. Ok, sí, es formación. Vale. Y lo que tú quieres preguntarle es...
So is it entrepreneur education? Am I understanding?
He's within in the education. He gives try to sell courses to improve people's speaking skills and writing skills, as a lot of CEOs have problems and speaking and writing skills through courses, education, etc. I thought it was a SaaS. But it's not a SaaS, it's basically it's education. So your question, Daniel, is how to... no me quedé con la pregunta. Entonces,
¿cómo podemos... La gente le encanta, pero no quiere pagar. Entonces, ¿cómo podemos hacer que la gente sea consciente de este valor y más en la sociedad del siglo XXI?
People love it, they don't want to pay. You remember the usual. You want to get it for free because everything is free in the internet. As she was mentioning before, if you don't pay, we are the product. So nothing's free. And people, well, they're still getting it now.
Yeah.
So could you give him any tips in this regard?
There's actually, I mean, I'm not a specialist in sort of that industry, but there are some interesting strategies, I think, that people are using, right? So, I mean, if you create content for free that gets people interested, then, you create sort of a funnel, right? So you give something to get something, right? So you're providing a lot of content for free. There's a woman on Twitter who does this really well, Lolita Taub. She's an investor herself. She's got this great newsletter. And so she started by basically creating a lot of content for free. And then there is a paid offering where basically it's a freemium model, right? So you get something for free, but if you want to go deeper, you pay for it, right? And you can do the same with the courses, right? You might say, I'm doing a free seminar on how to write a business email, and I'm just making it up. But then you really want to go deeper and get some coaching on it, etc. Here is the course package that allows you to go deeper. And then it's just a matter of, it's sort of a conversion, that you're hoping for, that out of 100 people who watch the free offering, a handful of people actually pay for it. And then you create a funnel basically to help you make those conversions. And I mean, you do have to produce a lot of valuable content, I think, to make those conversions. But there are people who specialize in those kinds of business models. I am not one of them.
Astrid, all the explorers are very seed ideas. So we're still right at the beginning. But what she says, Danielle, is very true. And I'm a very good customer of freemium. First of all, she said something very important, content. You have to give something that is very good as a start, that people want it. Then offer a bit for free. And then if you want to go more in depth, you pay for it. And I keep doing that. I try things, I like them, and I pay. I'm happy to pay once I try them and I see they're good. So probably that is your way, Daniel. ¿Sí? Nos ha seguido, ¿no?
And
sí, un poco. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, I put the link in chat for Lolita. She's got a great example of this. So you see on Twitter, she's producing a lot of content. And then I think she uses Substack for her paid newsletter. And then I don't know, I think she may also have a course offering, but I mean, that's an example of a successful strategy.
Okay, remember that, Daniel, and we'll go more deeper within the Explorer, Explorer these weeks. Okay, any more questions, guys? ¿Más preguntas?
Can I be the next one?
Por supuesto, Álvaro, adelante, go ahead.
So first of all, Astrid, it's a pleasure to be talking with you. And I have only two questions for you. The first one is, do you think that the use of agile methodologies plays a big role on the development of successful companies? And if so, do you use a certain framework of agile methodologies? Thank you so much.
Yeah, I do think I'm generally in favor of sort of the lean startup methodology and agile development. And I think it does lead to successful companies if you do it seriously, right? Like if you actually use it as a way to learn from your customers, learn from your users, and then iterate based on what you're learning. But you have to really listen, right? Like that can be the tricky part, right? So Christian, for example, may discover that his pill dispenser already exists in the market, and then the question is, can you pivot? Like if you learn something, are you then willing to make the change in your product strategy? And I don't know. I don't know that there are many differences in agile methodology frameworks. I think they all amount to the same thing, where you basically you build something, you test it, you collect the feedback, you learn from the feedback, you change what you have built, right? And round it goes, and you sort of get into a cadence of putting something out to users and listening to their feedback.
All right, thank you so much.
Right, Alvaro, yes, she's very right. Listen to the audience. Nobody wants to listen when they tell us, no, the product has to change, or that. No, my product, look, what I said, falling in love with your product, which is one of the basic, most common mistakes of entrepreneurs. I was the first one to did that when I had 2 startups. So as she was saying, listen and then be ready to pivot. El famoso lo de pivotar, la famosa palabreja de pivotar, que is to change your idea regarding on that test, learn, or the learning by doing, trial and error, all that. So Álvaro, ya sabes, a probar, y si no funciona, a pivotar. Okay? Y sí, lean startup and agile methodology forever. ¿Qué más? Chicos, chicas.
Can I go next?
¿Dónde están las mujeres de este grupo? ¿Qué pasa con las mujeres? Women power, what happened?
Here I am. Can I go next?
Okay, go ahead. Who's that?
Maria.
Okay, Maria, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So first of all, thank you for being with us today. My question is more personal oriented. I'm one of these 19-year-old babies just coming into the world of business. And I would like to know about your experience, like the biggest challenge you faced with your project and how you could overcome it.
Okay. Very good questions. I'm sure she had plenty of challenges to overcome. That's why she's thinking.
Yeah, I have to think. So I think, well, that's a really good question, especially since I didn't become an entrepreneur when I was 19. I would say the biggest challenge, and it's actually true for my company and for Zebras Unite both, right? So my challenge was when I was building my company that it didn't fit into the Silicon Valley paradigm. It just didn't fit, right? And investors were telling me I wasn't ambitious enough, I wasn't aggressive enough in the growth projections I was making. I didn't fit into their mental model. And the way I overcame it was basically, I don't want to say arrogance, but I was confident, right? That the problem wasn't me, the problem was them, and the problem was the paradigm, right? And I can do that with the benefit of life experience, because I was in my 40s when I created my company, and I knew about myself that I'm a very successful fundraiser, and it didn't make sense that all of a sudden I couldn't raise any financing anymore. But again, I say this with the benefit of a few more decades in this world. And so knowing, so that quality of believing in yourself, I think was incredibly helpful and important for me.
Awesome, that's very, thank you very much.
That's great, Maria. Did she answer your question?
Yes, absolutely.
Do you believe in yourself at 19 years old? You said you're 19.
I'm 19, yeah.
19, wow. Do you believe in yourself?
I do, I totally do. The hard thing is knowing who believes in you and who wants to invest in you. That's the hard part.
But if you believe in yourself, you have half of the way is already done. Nobody.
Yeah, and yeah, that's true, Elena. Although I don't want to sugarcoat it, Maria. I mean, I think what anybody faces, especially as a young woman, right? I mean, you will absolutely face prejudice, right? Like there's no sugarcoating. There is no, and there are actually some strategy. I have a business partner who is 20 years younger than I am, and she is she's very deliberate about how she presents herself publicly. So there are actually some tricks, you know, for young people. So she's taken off any of the dates on her LinkedIn profile. Like, I don't need to know, like, I don't care when you graduated from high school, don't put that on there, right? And so there are actually some tricks for how you can manage your image and how you show up so that people don't think, oh, Maria, she's only 19. Like you want to keep them a little bit uncertain, and maybe in the way you dress, in the way you show up, in the way you present yourself and present your business, you can sort of fudge that a little bit and actually you know, direct people away from your relative youth and focus their attention on what you're talking about, what you're saying, and what you're building. That's the trick. And it is, I'm not going to, again, not sugarcoating it. That is harder for women to do.
Oh yeah, it is. But things have changed a lot, and now there's a mindset, as you were saying, that things have to change even more. Mm-hmm. So as you said, all women, we do all tricks. We hide our age when we're too old or when we're too young, or we're doing this. Well, why not? Things are changing. But I'm impressed that at 19, she has confidence. It's very good to have confidence when you're an entrepreneur, because you're going to face a lot of obstacles, and to trust in yourself and to keep going. It's paramount. Moreover, if you want people to trust you, if you don't trust yourself and you don't have confidence in yourself, nobody's going to do. Okay, so that's the thing you have to transmit. Fantástico, María. Ya hablaremos más de esto. Más preguntas, more questions from the women. Celia.
Yes. Thank you, Astrid, for your time. During your talk, you talk about transparency, but I would like to know another metric to know that we are going into the zebra path instead of the unicorn path. And I think that's my only question, because you answer the other ones on the Twitch.
Yeah, I think, so in general, the zebra path, I would say transparency is good. Also how you design your operational systems. So for example, if you're building your company, you have a choice. Like from the very first day, you have a choice of how you treat your employees and how you treat your colleagues, right? And when my company was very young and very small, I was working, a woman, came to work for us who was pregnant, right? And she said, oh, I don't know if I should tell you. And I said, why not? I mean, you're pregnant, right? It's not the end of the world. Let's make a decision about how we deal with life, right? Like whether you're pregnant or you have to take care of your elderly parents or whatever it might be, you make a choice as an entrepreneur. And we didn't have a policy at the time because we're just a baby startup. And I said to her, well, do you want to write our policy? And she started to cry. She was so touched, like it just totally rocked. And so we came up with this very simple leave policy, and we use it to this day. It's like shockingly simple. Like we basically, no matter how much time you need off, just give us that much time advance notice. So if you want to take a day off, give us a day notice. If you want to take off 5 months because you're expecting a baby, then tell us 5 months before the baby is due. It's simple. It's such a simple policy. anybody can implement that. You can implement that as a startup entrepreneur from day one. It gives you the predictability, the planning, and now you're treating your co-workers as part of the enterprise, right? Like it's not an inconvenience that she's pregnant. It's not a horrible thing, right? It's just like you just plan for it. You build your company around a culture that takes care of its people, right? That's none of. I mean, it's obvious in some ways, right? Like think about the kind of company you would want to work for, and then just go build that company, and don't let anybody tell you otherwise.
Good. You have a choice as an entrepreneur. Remember, more questions.
Yeah, me if you want.
Okay. Remind me of your name.
Yeah, Aaron.
Aaron.
Yeah,
Beautiful
me.
name. Aaron.
Hi, Astrid. Nice to meet you. I would like you to ask you a couple of questions. The first one is, how do you do to promote your project or your idea to your target? What would you do?
And what's the other question? Is there another question?
I thought that you're going to answer me the first question, but I'm going to ask you the both. The first one is, what would you do to promote or get to know your project to your target, to the people? And the other question is, which techniques do you think that are necessary to survive in this global economy?
Wow.
Relevant.
Well, I suspect you will learn a lot about the first question in your program. The whole question of how you find sort of your target audience and what channels you use to advertise to them. I think whole dissertations are written about it, and I would be surprised if the Explorer program didn't have that covered. So I will just, I think you're all on day 2 of the program. So I think I would just say, wait till next week. I'm sure you're going to learn it. On the second question, I think the global economy, that's a really good question, right? Because the earth has become flat, right? Like we're all in each other's living rooms. It's really simple now to have a global audience. And so I think there is it puts sort of a greater premium on understanding how you can speak to people from many different cultures. I think companies that understand how they can appeal, like, to pick on Christian again, right? Like everybody has elderly parents. Like this problem of having elderly parents is a universal problem. And so it's really beneficial to figure out how you can speak to potentially customers everywhere. Right? It's not a Spanish problem, it's a universal problem. And so that ability to think about how does your target demographic experience the problem that you're solving, and understanding that deeply, right? So for example, in some cultures, the elderly people are so revered, right? You may have a different marketing message than you would have in a North American context, where the message might be, oh, this is convenient for a child who is living hundreds of miles away from a parent, and here's a way to sort of stay in touch remotely, right? So like having that facility of understanding different cultural contexts is incredibly beneficial in this global economy.
Perfect, thank you so much.
Good. It's like that they used to say, think globally, act locally, in a way, yeah? Have a global mindset, but then understand the culture and the behaviors and markets.
Yeah, or you could say, innovate locally, but sell globally, right? So use your direct context and experience, but think about it from like the sort of how can it universally resonate? Yeah.
Okay, because did you have any company or business in mind, Aaron?
Well, I'm willing to develop an interview simulator for students to practice. I'm studying advertising and public relations, which is a different field, but I'm attracted to that. So I wish I can expand my idea and my project to overseas and help other students.
Excellent. Interview simulator. Will you be using artificial intelligence?
Yeah, a live bot, exactly.
Excellent. That'll be very helpful for students and for not, for everyone.
Not the students, yeah, for everyone.
And does it tell us at the end if we pass the interview or not?
Yeah, of course. It will give you tips and your errors and the things you did good.
Excellent. Well, we have time for one more question, guys. I think we're running out of time. So come on, this is your chance.
Hello, I'm Jalila.
Okay.
Nowadays, we have some problems in the world. One of them is that there are people who don't have access to the electricity. And another problem is that in our daily basis, we can, or most of times we run out of battery. And we think that it has to be a product which my product of my team is JEB, which is a generator of electricity box. Is a small rubber coated sphere the size of a golf ball, and when the JEB moves, so does a pendulum inside it, activating a micro generator which transforms the kinetic energy into electrical energy that is stored in a battery.
Wow.
The JEB allows us to take advantage of all the movements we make on daily basis, and its users will no longer have to suffer if they run out of batteries in their devices, or if they move or live in a place without access to electricity. And so my question is to Astrid, what do you think a project must have to succeed in the current market? And thank you so much for your talk, and I find it very, very interesting, the advices. Thank you so much.
Okay, she's just giving us a 2-minute pitch there. A minute pitch.
Yeah, I think with anything like what you're describing, there is a I think there's a really interesting opportunity, right? Because as you say, so much of the world faces these limitations, right? So I think an important thing to get right is to make sure that your product specifications are compliant with all sort of the regulatory needs, and sort of that it's good design, that it's that it's easy to clean, all this stuff, right? And there's actually an organization that you might be interested in, Jalila, called Engineers for Change. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
No.
They're I think that's right. Or
Engineers for Change.
Yeah.
Okay, I will
No,
check it out.
I'm that's not quite right. I'm blanking on I'll find it.
Don't worry, we'll research for it.
Yeah, it's what I'm trying to get at, or maybe it's there's also Engineers Without Borders. So there is a whole community of engineers building products for sort of low bandwidth, limited electricity settings. And if you can get it right, then you have a potentially built-in market in sort of the humanitarian field, right? Lots of humanitarian organizations working in refugee camps, working in disaster areas, become sort of natural buyers of products like what you're developing. And that's a really useful community to tap into and get some early product testing from other engineers for a product like yours, And then again, some of the same guidance applies as for what Christian was talking about. There might be companies that are very interested in this. Maybe it's a mobile phone company, for example, that could be sort of a natural venture, like what do they call them? Like they have corporate venture labs, right? That could be very interested in what you're doing.
There's a lot of initiatives in Spain, actually, Astrid, regarding energy, energía positiva, all the private, public companies, big companies in energy. Jalila, ask an explorer, because there's thousands of programs for engineers with projects like yours, and they're fantastic with grants and with acceleration programs, and then pilots in their own big companies. There's a lot going on in Spain. So there's a lot of potential there. You have a lot of space to grow.
Thank you.
Guys, I'm unfortunate we have no time, unless there's somebody has a question that can't hold it, or we will die here. I think we have to go. Is there anyone else that has a quick question for Astrid?
I want to ask something quick. Thank you very much. Sorry. Thank you, Astrid, for all the tips. I have my idea has already competitors, or I don't know if it's right to say that, but the idea of the wheel will help me to create to improve that. But how can I ¿cómo se puede decir? How can I be brave with that? Because how can I be brave when you need? ¿Cómo puedes
superar esa competition? ¿Cómo te enfrentas a la competencia?
Sí,
but how do you face competition?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Competition is good, they say. If there's no competition, your product is rubbish. They say so.
Yeah, I think it's.
I have ese miedo.
She's scared. There's a competition, sure. And that you're scared of failing, I guess. No, failure. What would you recommend, Astrid?
Yeah, that's really one of those important things that any entrepreneur needs to confront, sort of in the sort of your internal landscape of how you feel about competition. I think what I find helpful is if you continue with that agile mindset that we talked about, that Alvaro introduced, right? Like and sort of think about testing how you compare to your competition in that same sort of iterative approach of trying, testing, collecting data, learning, and refining. And then you have to make a deal with yourself and say, you know, if I'm going to try this for this many months or this many years, right? And if it doesn't work, then we'll make a change. I think that's how I would approach it, to sort of try and put a container around the fear so it doesn't become debilitating. Just remind yourself it's an experiment, and that's all it is. It's just an experiment. If it doesn't work, then you pivot, right? Then you learn and pivot.
You pivot. She's giving you guys the formula. She's giving you the formula. Now we have to execute it, which is obviously the most difficult part. But there you go. She's giving you the formula. That's it. Those are the steps. That's it. Don't go look any further. Now let's do it. Unfortunately, we ran out of time. I'm sure Astrid has plenty of work to do in Portland, Oregon, because she started her morning today. Thank you so much, all the Explorer guys, and for joining us and for all your questions. There's going to be a summary of this whole meeting and the chat and the interview and your questions in the blog. In the meantime, I just summarize everything we've said in 3 words. I'm going to keep 3 words. You don't have to dress like a zebra in black and white. You see Astrid is not dressed in black and white. Nevertheless, you can carry your little zebra around. We are all zebras, remember? With E, zebra. There's 3 things. Mindset, being a zebra is a mindset. 2, being a zebra is a community. And 3, being a zebra is being diverse, because diversity is good for business. Thank you so much, Dr. Astrid Scholz. It's been a real pleasure. We're all now Zebra Unite believers. Join the movement. Explorers, good luck. Y hasta pronto. See you soon. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all. It was a pleasure being with you this morning.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye now.
Goodbye. Bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.